Please.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining tonight. Rabbi Josh will be formally introducing our panelists, David and John. Um, but for those of you who attended the 130th celebration of Jewish life at Brown, you know we're all in for a big treat. And I just want to extend my thanks to David and John for being with Brown RISD Hillel and the Brown Jewish Alumni and Friends community tonight. We're very grateful that you're taking this time to speak with us. Just some quick notes on our run of show. Rabbi Josh will be doing some introductions, and then David and John will be having a conversation for about 30 minutes. And then David will moderate some Q&A for the last 20 minutes. Thank you so much for everybody who submitted questions in advance. You can feel free to submit questions in the chat during the conversation. Those are going to be going directly to Rabbi Josh, and then he'll be passing them along to David. And so I'm now going to turn things over to Rabbi Josh Bolton, who's the executive director at Brown RISD Hillel.
Thank you so much, Abby. Give you a moment to get your spotlight. Okay. Greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening from a snowy and basically snowbound Providence, where we're all slowly digging out. Um, this is a warm evening and a nice opportunity for us to get together. I'm excited to be welcoming two leaders from our community, not just the Brown community, but the broader Rhode Island community. These are institutional leaders, thought leaders, and we're so grateful to have you both with us. Um, and so I'll jump in the interviewers chair this evening. David and Cicilline, who is, of course, the president and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation here in the state. Um, Prior to being appointed as the lead of the foundation, David represented Rhode Island's first congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives for 12 years, beginning in 2011. And prior to Congress, he was the mayor of Providence for two terms, 2003 to 2011. So more than a quarter century of extraordinary public service and civic leadership. David is a graduate of Brown University and currently serves on the Brown University Corporation. And most importantly, in one of the most highly anticipated Jewish events of the year here locally, David is soon to become a bar mitzvah. And I understand he's in the final stages of preparations for that great event. So mazel tov to you. In the interviewees chair this evening, we're lucky to have Professor John M. Friedman. John is the inaugural Vassalero Family Dean of the Thomas J. Watson Jr. School of International and Public Affairs at Brown University, where he's also professor of economics and international and public affairs. John's scholarship has focused on inequality and social mobility, most recently on upward mobility in higher education, writing on how admissions policies could increase social mobility at the nation's most selective private universities, and assessing the value of standardized testing in admissions. John's the founding co-director of Opportunity Insights, which I had the pleasure of lingering on that website today. I wanted to know, what is it? So I spent about 10, 15 minutes, and it's actually an extraordinary data platform that, if I can put it in my own words, reveals the contemporary economic stories of the communities that we live in and the nation more broadly. And I highly recommend it if you haven't had the chance to visit Opportunity Insights. John was previously served as chair of the economics department here at Brown from 2001 to 2024. And in the spirit of parody, John is celebrating his 33rd anniversary as being a bar mitzvah this year. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand it over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Rabbi, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm really thrilled to be part of this conversation, and I want to say thank you to Dean Friedman for taking the time to be with us tonight to speak about the launch of the Watson School, about your Jewish values and your commitment to diverse perspectives as the school's inaugural dean. So we've received a few dozen pre-submitted questions from the audience that I've read through carefully, and I hope that they're really reflected in the themes that I've pulled together for our discussion tonight. So we'll start with, because there were a number of individuals who submitted questions about the actual launch, and it was clear that they maybe were not present for some of the activities, and not everyone who's on the Zoom tonight had the chance to follow the very exciting launch of the Watson School this year. So maybe you could start, Dean, with just a bit of the history of the Watson Institute, how it became a school, what really led to this evolution, and frankly, what it means for Brown to make this transition from an institute to a school.
Well, sure. And before I get to that, I just want to thank Abby and Rabbi Josh for helping to kind of organize this event tonight, and you, David, for moderating. When Rabbi Josh introduced you, he left out what I think is the most important thing.
I know what you're going to say.
Which is that David is on the Watson board of directors. And so, and he's also serves as a senior fellow at the school. And so what that means is that we collectively are each other's bosses. And so we have fully circular relationships. So yeah, the Watson School launch, which happened formally this past summer, is really the next step in the journey of this institution at Brown that started back in the 1980s. And so the story begins when Howard Swearer, who was president of Brown in the late 70s and 80s, he was visiting Thomas Watson Jr. in Moscow, actually. Watson was serving as the ambassador to Moscow, Soviet Union, at the end of the Carter administration. And, they were talking about the world, and they were talking about great power conflict, the risk of nuclear war. And they said, wow, Brown should really have a center that's, not just focused on writing academic papers, but really thinking about how these issues play out in the world and trying to contribute to addressing what they felt was one of the great challenges of that era. And coming back, they founded something called the Center for Foreign Policy Development a few years later. And in fact, the first director of that center was the deputy chief of mission, basically the number 2 person who was working with Ambassador Watson in Moscow at that time. His name is Mark Garrison. And so Watson really started as the Center for Foreign Policy, and it's grown over time. I kind of think of it as going through 3 or 4 different eras. So there was this period at the beginning that was really very focused on foreign policy, great power conflict. In the 90s, it was established as an institute, kind of upgraded from a center. And what that meant is it started to broaden out and kind of do a few things at the same time. And I think you see that in some of the area center studies, area study centers, and kind of an increasing focus on solving problems of development or human rights. The Institute kind of took another big step forward in 2014 when it absorbed the Taubman Center. The Taubman Center had previously been an independent center at Brown, really focused on American policies and politics. And so what that signaled is really, again, a further broadening of the Institute from something that was really almost exclusively focused internationally to something that really focused about kind of policy and public affairs more broadly. And that's reflected in the name that it adopted then, the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs. And so I think of the school launch as really just the next step on this journey. It's an opportunity for us to, broaden out even more and to, serve as that hub for policy and public engagement across a wider set of issues, partnering with a wider set of departments across campus. And of course, that doesn't happen overnight. If you'd been a fly on the wall in the first Watson School faculty meeting in September, it would have looked pretty similar to the last Watson Institute faculty meeting in May. But we're already making some important strides to kind of to start to launch that next phase of the school, and we can talk about it more tonight. But I think it's what's so nice about it is we're have the opportunity to both build on this rich and storied history at Brown, but also to build out into new areas and expand what we're doing. And so I think that's the combination of that is really what drew me to this position, made me think that this was, I've said this a lot, is really a once in a generation opportunity to grow and build a new school like this at a place like Brown. It just really just doesn't come along very often. So I'm just tremendously excited to be in this role.
And I will say, as a member of the board of Watson, there's tremendous excitement about your vision and your passion, your commitment in this new role. So there's a lot of big hopes, and I know you're going to deliver on all of them. You recently participated, as did I, in the celebration of 130 years of Jewish life at Brown, a really wonderful weekend. And I thought, since our audience is Hillel and alumni, as the first Watson School dean and the first Jewish dean of the school, maybe speak a little bit about how Jewish values exist at the Watson School, how they kind of reflect the way you do your work, your leadership as the new dean, and just sort of what they mean in your own life, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't let this opportunity pass without thanking Abby and Rabbi Josh and so many others. It was just, I hope many of you on the call were able to make it to campus that weekend. And what an amazing, I say event, but it really was like 100 events across the weekend. It was just an amazing time. So yeah, I think that, I think this is true about the Watson School, but really about the way that I go about things. I think it's really strongly influenced by Jewish values and what I've studied growing up. So let me just mention kind of three different dimensions here. So the first one, which maybe is obvious at a place like Brown, but it's really the importance of learning and scholarship. But not just in isolation, right? It's all about people being in community and studying together and arguing about these things, and especially with people who you disagree with, right? That's the essence of the activity, and it's something that's not just we do as part of the professional mission, but it's something that I think makes us better humans, and so that's something that is definitely kind of a core focus at the school, and something that I, really find to be very important more broadly. The second thing is, and this is, it's not just the 33rd anniversary of my bar mitzvah, but my older son was bar mitzvahed last year. My younger son is going to be bar mitzvahed about this time next year. And so, I've really been thinking a lot about, in my family, in the professional life, the importance of teaching, of passing these commitments down to the next generation. And it's, not just something that we do in a light way, but really making sure that what we're passing down is rigorous, it's intellectually serious, it's morally grounded. That's, I think, such an important part of what we do. And I would say, right, it's not just professors and students, right? Having alumni and parents and everyone involved, right? This, again, is a community level effort. And then the final thing is that, and this maybe, starts to get to something which is more distinctive about the Watson School. It's the importance of doing all of this, not just for for its own sake, but for the purpose of having an impact on the world. When I have come at my scholarship and my teaching, over the past 20 years or so, as I've been, in this profession, I've never wanted to think of publishing an academic paper that ends up in some journal as the end of the process, right? That's, the beginning, right? The goal is to do this work, in my case, to learn about upward mobility, to understand how it is that we can, help societies and help children achieve that goal, that, your opportunities in life do not depend on the circumstances of your birth. how can we do this in a way where we actually impact the world? We actually help us get closer to that. And whether it's that topic for me or other policy goals for others, I think that's really core to what we're after at the Watson School. We want to have this rigorous scholarship. We want to have teaching and learning, but it's in service of having impact in the world. And of course, we might disagree on what that impact is, and that's great. And we're going to argue about it, and that's part of the fun and part of the process. But so I think those hopefully give you a sense of the ways in which I really do think that the way I come about this, the way that we think about this at the Watson School are really, pretty deeply rooted in Jewish values.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you for that. So you mentioned this, Dean, in your first answer that you really saw the Watson School launch as the kind of natural evolution of this next phase of what started off as a center. And so maybe you could speak a little bit about what your those short-term and long-term goals are for the school with respect particularly to faculty growth, research, and teaching, and what, sort of you have, I think, some big, bold plans, and just sharing some of that with those who are on the Zoom with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is something that we've been engaged with at the school for, really the last 8 months since the launch, which is to think about, we have this opportunity. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to realize this opportunity for growth and, figure out what that next kind of era of the school is? And so, I think, the goal is to really be the policy hub at Brown to, within this, it's not just studying, to bring people from outside who are really impactful in the world. So we like to say we bring the world to Brown, and we try to bring the best of Brown back to the world. One way in which we're thinking of expanding is into new issue areas. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But, for instance, we've highlighted technology and policy as a key thing that's super important in the world, not just today, but I think it's not going away anytime soon. Whether it's about AI or robots or quantum computing or climate tech, whatever it is, understanding the interplay between technology and policy is going to be so important. And, that's something where Watson hasn't really had as much of a footprint in the past, but we're really looking to grow. And it's not just growing into new issue areas, it's partnering with a broader set of units across campus. So, this opens up, just as an example again, to partner with the computer science department or the engineering school or a lot of the amazing medical tech work that's being done at the medical school. We're trying to take at the moment there are jointly appointed faculty from about 5 different units across campus, but honestly, it's like 85% people from political science and sociology. There's nothing wrong with political science and sociology, and you can see why it's primarily those disciplines because of the historical focus and emphasis of Watson. But as we expand into these new areas, I also want to expand just much more broadly across campus. So more people from economics. We've not really had any relationship with the School of Public Health before. Psychology, history. The list can go on. Another thing I think which you'll hear behind a lot of what I'm saying is the importance of interdisciplinary engagement, right? That's something that I think is really important at Brown more broadly, but it's also something that's really important in the policy world. I worked in the White House for a year, and hard as I looked, I could not find a statistics meeting. I couldn't find an economics meeting. We just had meetings where we were trying to solve problems, and you had to bring all those different tools to the table in order to figure things out. So what we're really trying to do is create that environment at the Watson School where it's not just that we have faculty and practitioners and others from a broad set of places, but it's an environment where people really get to interact with each other. They really get to learn from each other, to be in dialogue with one another. I think that's not just the situation that leads to more progress on policy, but it's also my experience, that makes my research better. It makes what goes on in the classroom better. And so, those are some, it gives you some sense, I think, of the direction broadly in which we think Watson's going to go. I'll also mention that, part of the way we're going to achieve that is through a lot of growth. We're aiming to do something like doubling the faculty over the next 5 years. And so, that it's a kind of amazing opportunity. It gives us a lot of running room in order to really expand what we're doing in a way that sometimes isn't as possible in academia, where tenured faculty don't turn over that much, and so it can be really difficult to move things this fast. But I think that's what really gives us kind of a leg up as we want to establish ourselves as one of the best policy schools in the world.
It's interesting, and the description of this sort of, it's an interdisciplinary approach, is, I think, one of really the distinguishing features of Brown. It's sort of something we pride ourselves on. So it's really terrific to hear you speak about how you intend to bring that approach as you build a school. So we had a number of students who asked, specifically how the school launch will impact students, both undergraduate and graduate students. Sort of what should they expect? What might be different in terms of the experience of university students?
Yeah, so I think especially in these next few years, you're going to start to see a lot more courses in new areas. So let me just give you two examples. I already mentioned technology and policy. That's something we're really going to be working to build up. And to say more, right, it's not just about technology policy in some narrow sense of like how do we regulate AI, right? That's important, but I want you to think about this in the broader sense of what are all the ways that these new emergent technologies like AI will change the way we want to think about policy problems. What new opportunities does it open up that we didn't have before? But also, what challenges does it create, maybe even in spaces that have nothing to do with technology, or policies that are not technology oriented, right? So if you think about, something, people are thinking about, will AI displace a lot of workers in the same way that increased trade and increased automation displaced a lot of workers 20, 25 years ago? And if that will happen, can we do better as a country? Can we do better from a policy perspective in terms of making sure that when the job goes away, again, that's the beginning of something new, not just the end of a career, and then you sit around and are unemployed or work at McDonald's for the rest of your career. I think we didn't do a great job of that the first time around, and it's wasn't just an economic problem. I think a lot of the social divisiveness, I think a lot of the political polarization, the flight to the extremes, a lot of that flows, if you look in the data, from this really disappointment that people had with the way that their communities evolved over, from these various shocks. And often not just for themselves, it's for their kids as well. There's kind of nothing that gets people as pissed off as getting the sense that their kids don't really have a chance. So that's one thing. We're gonna have a lot more focus on technology. Another example, and this is something that's both a new emphasis for the school, but also kind of an evolution on an old emphasis. There's going to be a lot more international economics at Watson now than there's been in the past. And I think if you go back to the 1980s and the focus around great power competition and international relations at the founding, the relationship between the US and the Soviet Union, it really was primarily political and military, right? There was just not a lot of economic exchange between the two blocs in a way that meant that economics and trade and that just wasn't as big a part of the relationship. Today's world is totally different. It's so much more integrated. The US and China, and honestly, even Russia still, are deeply integrated in the world economy in a way that raises a ton of economic questions around supply chains, around tariffs, around investment, around other issues that you have to think about as part of that global security conversation. And so, as the world has evolved, I think Watson's evolving as well. And I think what you're going to see, even just starting next year, is a really kind of a revamped Rhodes Center for International Finance. We have 3 new international economists we've hired at the school that'll be starting in July. And so that's another example of a change you'll see, I think, really in the near term, reflecting some of these new directions.
Great. So there have been some concerns with the breadth and the representativeness of past events at Brown, as I know you're aware, in many cases as they relate to partisan speakers as well as the conflict in the Middle East. And a number of questions from the audience center on what you will do to ensure viewpoint diversity during such a polarized moment and why it's important to you. And I think this is a question which looms over everything we do in the world in which we're currently living. But I think particularly in the launch of a new school that is focused on public policy and international affairs, there's so many examples where that kind of deep emotion and polarization surfaces. So how do you think about that? And how can you sort of reassure folks that you take that issue really seriously?
Yeah, well, no, I really thank you, David, for bringing that up, and to the audience members for raising it. It is incredibly important, and as you note, having a breadth of perspectives, it's something that's important everywhere at Brown, and it's part of one of the 4 university values that we just enacted this past summer. But I think at a school like Watson, that's a policy school, it really goes beyond that general importance to be, really almost a professional necessity. From Congress, right? You don't hash out policy deals in a room with people you agree with, right? You don't make peace with your friends. And so the ability to understand conflicting perspectives, the ability to have a constructive dialogue with somebody who you disagree with, and just convincing that person that everything you say is right and to entirely take your side, like that can't be the end goal. The goal has to be to make constructive progress along the way, and you can't do that if you don't have that underlying diversity of viewpoints in which to do this. And so I don't think this is something that's new at the Watson School. Even before my time, I'm sympathetic to many people that we haven't always at Brown or at many other universities, that there hasn't always been the breadth of perspectives that we would want. But I do think that Watson historically has been pushing in the right direction on this. And so if you just over the last couple of years, we as part of the campus debate around the Middle East, we've had Bret Stephens and Einat Wilf coming out, and so I really I thank Ed Steinfeld and Wendy Schiller, who are my predecessors as a director and interim director at Watson, for doing that. And that's something we're continuing this year. We have John Spencer coming in 2 weeks. We're actually going to live stream that event. So those of you who are on the call and are interested, you should make sure to come on campus or sign up to follow online. We have Jake Clayton, who's the current U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York in Manhattan. He's coming in April. But those are just 2 of many speakers. And so it's something that it just really I can't imagine having a vibrant community at Watson without doing this. But it's not just about the events. I think it's something that we have to reinforce every day in the way we talk to students, the way we talk to each other, the way that we teach in our classes. We need to teach people the ways that we can constructively engage. And I think that really takes two different forms, right? One is just to be really, really clear that coming at debates in a biased or prejudiced way is just not acceptable. And so, especially, in today's world, being really on the lookout to make sure that anti-Semitism is just clearly not welcome at Watson. I think that's so important. But of course, it's not just anti-Semitism. We need to make sure that, there's no place for racism or anti-Muslim or anti-Arab bias, right? Just none of this can be part of a constructive conversation. And then the other side, more positively, what are we going to do? I like to say we can make progress by being respectful, curious, and gracious. Right, respectful of each other's differences of opinion, right? The point is not to just convince everyone because the other person must be wrong. It's to understand what's going on. We do that by being curious, right? Well, okay, it's great. So we disagree. Well, why is it that we disagree? Do we have different values? Are we using different data? Are we making different inferences from the same data? Like what is exactly going on? And whatever the answer is, that's an important first step then to make further progress. And then finally, I think it's just really important to be gracious. What I mean by that is, gracious in seeking the intent of what others are saying, right? These conversations can often be quite tricky, especially when issues get fraught, just because language can be used in ways that are so kind of imbued with meaning, but in ways that can be understood differently by different people. And that's not saying, if somebody says something that's anti-Semitic, we need to call them out for that. But also we need to make sure that let's just really try to understand what someone's saying rather than kind of leap to a conclusion based on a surface interpretation of what's going on.
That's a great litany of respectful, curious, and gracious. Good rules to guide the discussion in your life, actually. Another kind of question that's related to that, an audience member commented on how many strongly held viewpoints are emotionally established. And it's often difficult to affect by reason just because the emotions are so deep and so real. How do you think an academic perspective really can help serve as a bridge and provide constructive conversation in and out of the classrooms, not just in terms of the academic work, but help guide people to more productive, more useful lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's you're right. This is not something that we only want to think of in the classroom. I mean, just, talking with your friends about why you disagree about something. This is, these are tools which, and approaches which really, I think, are an important part of our everyday lives as engaged citizens and as community members. So I think that, again, part of it is, especially in those really charged debates, just really trying to understand, what is the value system, what is deeply held as something that we seek that is part of somebody else's argument. And it's totally fine if you then disagree with that and you say, look, like you're really valuing this and I'm valuing this other thing. That's totally fine. But I think that, from my own experience, what can seem on the surface to be something that's just kind of like an irreconcilable, like how could you ever make any progress? When you dig a little bit deeper, you can get to the point of saying, well, I don't agree with you, and that's not the perspective I'm coming from, but I can understand how you get there. I can understand, first of all, why somebody would value the things that you value, and then I can understand, well, given those as values, I can understand how you then get to this position. I also think that there are lots of debates which we think might be about values, but when you get into it, actually turn out to be about something else. So let me give you an example here. You mentioned, or maybe Rabbi Josh mentioned up top that, one of the things I've been involved in over the past few years is this debate at universities like Brown and elsewhere in the country about whether to bring back standardized testing as part of admissions. And that's something that I think if you come at it on the surface, it feels very much like this, wow, there's a lot of people that disagree and it's really just all about, strongly held values. But when we sat on this committee here at Brown, that contained faculty members and corporation members, what we realized after a few conversations was that we actually both held the same set of values, which is that we wanted to do our best to, find the best students and do that in a way that, was not biased or tilted against, students coming from one type of background versus another, and certainly not biased against students coming from what you might think of as kind of an under-resourced background. And once we figured that out, what we thought was this values disagreement really just turned into a joint process to try to understand the data and understand, well, okay, now if we agree what we're after, let's use the data to understand, are test scores helpful in that mission of finding the best students and doing so in an unbiased way, or are they not helpful? And we looked at the data in various ways. And what started actually, this is something I'm just tremendously proud of the community. what started out with a committee that was essentially unanimously opposed to the change we ended up recommending, through this conversation, it turned around to something that was nearly unanimous in the other direction. And it was something that really came through this dialogue, through this debate, in a way that I think was just incredibly helpful. The other thing I'll say, and David, I think this is something that I'm sure you've seen in your years in politics here and in DC. Sometimes these issues that seem like they're just totally polarized, sometimes that's something that people are just kind of putting on as a show. And that's not to say they don't have deeply held values, but you get a few inches below the surface, you get into someone's office and you start talking about something, you get into committee meetings where it's maybe, outside of the glare of the media spotlight. And I think people are a lot more interested in constructive solutions than you might think if you were just watching cable TV or checking on Twitter. And so, I don't want to try to convince you that there aren't serious debates in the world that people are really polarized around. That's true. But I think it's maybe not as bad as some people think because, Twitter is so polarized, because cable news, right? It like thrives off the conflict. Let me tell you the story of this, great, compromise that we made that, that like doesn't, get the tweets flowing the way that some takedown does.
Yeah. And it I think also is about learning and developing skills to sort of be a really good listener, to be able to say to people, why do you have that view? And also, where did you learn that information that informs that judgment? I think that gets back to kind of the data and beginning with a set of shared values. So I think really
and David,
valuable.
I know that you've been doing such great work on this at the Rhode Island Foundation too, with your emphasis on civic health and I really think it's we've talked about this at Brown, we've talked about this at Watson, but this is really a society-wide thing that I think we all need to pull together on to move our political system, to move in our society in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another audience member asks, how will issues about Israel and the Middle East fit into the focus you've described at the Watson School? I think that's a question a lot of folks are interested.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And again, I really, I talked a little bit about some of these core areas that we've developed up front. And I think that's a really great lens through which I think we're going to come at this. So, one of our core areas is international economics, politics, and security. I don't think I need to convince anyone on this call that there are a ton of issues in the Middle East that are really important there. And you just open up the newspaper today and you see it. But I think there are another set of really interesting issues that I don't think we want all of our work on the Middle East to just be forced into countries going to war with each other or oil. And so just to give a few examples, and this is far from a complete list. This is really we're at the outset here. We're just kind of giving you some sense. Another of our core areas is going to be social and economic policy, and this is something where, just speaking personally, I am just really fascinated by the incredibly rapid transformation domestically of some economies and societies in the Middle East. So, not much more than 10 years ago, women could not drive in Saudi Arabia, and that's totally changed now. The way that the Emirates are open to the world or open to Israel is, completely different than, again, even, 5 or 10 years ago. And so what's underlying that transformation, and what can we learn from it about how other societies might take a similar path? So, that's another example. I mentioned that technology and policy is going to be a big new focus of the school. I think Israel is a place that's had probably, pound for pound, the most impactful technology industry in the world. Understanding not only, what those impacts are, but, what is it about the society, about the structure that has led to, such leadership on technology, right? Part of technology and policy is what you want to do with the technologies, but part of it is about, how do we set it up so that we generate more innovations going forward, right? That's really the engine of economic growth, the engine of rising living standards that I think we're all seeking. And so, those are just a couple of examples, but, I really think that, the Middle East is such a fascinating area. Israel is a fascinating country. And so we're going to, not just in those traditional kind of international relations guys, I think we're going to have a lot to say on it at the new Watson School.
So, Dean, I think there are particularly those of us who are in Rhode Island and have served in certain leadership positions. We really understand Brown as such an important asset to the larger community of Rhode Island. And I wonder if you would speak a little bit about what the school's goals might mean in terms of policy and research here in Rhode Island and a connection to kind of local issues and important public policy. And I can say we're already benefiting from that at the Rhode Island Foundation with some great Watson Fellows. So you can use me as an example.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, this is something where, if we're just being honest, I don't think the Watson School historically has been nearly as involved in the community as I would like. Now, part of the reason is if, you recall, this was really founded as something geared internationally. And so, if you're focused on conflict between the US and the Soviet Union, maybe it's not quite as natural to emphasize local issues. But as the Institute broadened and now it's a school, this is something that, I feel is just incredibly important for the school, important to have opportunities for the students, and important for the community. So, as you know, this is something that I've really tried to emphasize and prioritize over the first year. And, part of that is just going out and meeting with people and asking, how can we help? Trying to foist ourselves on local partners, that's no way to make it work. But I think, what you mentioned with the Rhode Island Foundation, I'll tell people a little bit about our master's program. We have a 12-month master's program in public affairs. Really kind of, it's intense, but it gets you right back out in the labor market just after a year. And an important part of it is to make sure that you get experiential learning. You really understand how these issues come together in the world. And the most important part of that experiential curriculum is something called the Policy in Action Project, where in a small group with other students, you work with an actual external organization on an actual problem that they are facing to trying to help them solve. And we have generated a bunch of new projects this year, partnering with the Rhode Island Foundation, with City Hall, with a bunch of state agencies, with the City Council, in ways that I'm really happy about. And I want that to be the start, not the end point of all this. It's going to take us a little while to build up to something larger, but I'd really love to see a hub at Watson or a center or something that's really focused first on kind of deploying the expertise at Watson to help out in the community, and two, to helping get students engaged in those efforts. And so, I think the first place where, I really hope that we can, have this type of deeper impact is in workforce development. It's something that's incredibly important as a local issue, but also something where the university is already now investing $50 million in workforce development in Rhode Island over the next 10 years. And so what I'm hoping to do with the Watson School is make sure first that we are doing that as a university in ways that are as well informed by data and evidence as we can, but then also making sure that this experience of these investments helps us learn how to do it better. And then that learning can really suffuse out into not just other workforce programs in the state of Rhode Island, but, I want this to become a model nationally. So, this is something that, stay tuned, because I think we're going to have a lot more to say on this, but it's something that's a new area, but one that's just incredibly important for the school.
So, Dean, I just have a couple more questions, and I know we're getting near the end, but I want to get back to this because I think it's such an important role of universities, and that is really how do you plan, particularly as dean of the Watson School, to really encourage students to engage with uncomfortable topics and points of view which might differ from their own. I mean, it's a hard thing to get anyone to do, but particularly important for people who are going to be leaders in developing or advancing public policy or work, domestically or internationally on important, controversial issues. So you must have already given some thought to how you intend to encourage students to approach the world and approach their work in that way.
So the part of the school where we can do kind of the most directed, the most intentional engagement on this is in the classroom, because that's something where everybody's got to be there, and we can force you to do things in the classroom that you might not want to do elsewhere, and that's exactly part of what you said, where it's important to push people out of their comfort zone. So how do you do that in the classroom? Well, I think the first thing is that just by modeling, by really going out of one's way as an instructor to flesh out opposing points of view. And so, I'm not teaching this year just because I'm full up on work trying to get the school off the ground, but I've taught in the past a course called Using Big Data to Understand Social and Economic Problems. And there's not a single social or economic problem that we were trying to understand that didn't involve some trade-offs and didn't involve something that came out as different perspectives. And oftentimes they were different perspectives that landed as a Republican or a Democrat perspective, but oftentimes they were perspectives that, a lot of disagreement on way to do things within parties as well. And I just was try to be really intentional with saying, look, let's lay all this out on the table and let's do our best to understand why what might be the thing you're trying to get at by solving this problem with this solution as opposed to that solution. I think the next thing that you can then do, once you've gotten people used to, you've kind of normalized this hearing of opinions that, maybe they're not used to hearing. I would often like to set up, low stakes debates, but where you assign students the side of the argument that they have to argue for. And, I think this is not just good practice from an intellectual perspective, where it really forces you to get inside, maybe a perspective that is not as natural to you. It's really important as a skill, right? When you try to develop your arguments out in the world, understanding what the other side is going to say is incredibly important. And, again, when I worked in the White House, we used to assign top people to work as a so-called red teaming, right? Here's our budget. What are the 20 worst things that the Republicans are going to say about our Democratic budget? And it could be, what are the 20 worst things they could say as like a catchphrase on cable TV? What are the 20 worst things they could say in like a policy brief where they're arguing to other, more policy engaged people that we're idiots and we don't know what we're doing? You really got to think these things through, because, you can't be prepared for that if you're not willing to really dive inside someone's shoes. And then I think what that experience does is it just starts to make you not just more used to thinking about these broad perspectives. I actually think you learn a ton by putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And, you would be surprised how often something that started as a red team exercise, this didn't happen all the time, but every so often something that starts as a red team exercise, you're like, I don't know, like those are actually some pretty good points. Like maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we need to think this through more. And so, I think that, again, those are just some examples, but I think that the classroom is the place where we have the best ability to really get people out of their comfort zone and to teach these critical skills. And then all the other things, whether they be study groups or events or community conversations, right? Those are opportunities to practice these things. But I think the real development opportunities are in the classroom.
All right, so I'm going to end with kind of a more fun question, and actually two quick ones. One is, if you could have a dream panel come and speak at Watson, who would be on it, and why?
Oof. Um, can I get a topic? Like, would like literally like anyone in the
Yeah,
world? This is
anybody, you can have
a,
anybody. You're the dean of the Watson School. You can have any.
Ah, well, I would start with David Cicilline.
Oh.
Um, whew, that is tough. Well, look, I think that AI is such an important issue right now. I've told everyone that we want to be thinking about technology and policy. Um, and so um, I would find three or four different people who have really thought hard about the good things and the bad things that might come from AI, and I would try to get them together and have a debate. So, you want to start with someone who's just like an unabashed, really, thoughtful, engaged, but someone who's positive about this. So you maybe start with like a Sam Altman, someone like that. Um, you also want to then find someone who is, a real critic, somebody who's really thought through all the problems that can come. I know somebody I like who we actually had at Brown a couple years ago, Zeynep Tufekci. She's, really thoughtful and about some of these issues. And then I think you want some people who are maybe more in the middle, but kind of practically attached to different ways in which AI might be, the applications might be used. So maybe invite someone like Jen Palka, who's thought really hard about how you can use computers and more recently AI to make government work better for people. How can you cut through red tape? Can you make it easier to start a business? Can you make it easier for someone whose situation makes them eligible for SNAP, but where like getting the paperwork all filled out can be a problem and they don't get it? Um, and then I might think of somebody who is using AI for, just in a very different way. So maybe somebody who's trying to use it in education, maybe, or some of this great new work coming out using AI for pharmaceutical development. There are lots of good examples there, but and there are some great academics who've done work here, but you really want people that have that combination. It's getting different viewpoints is great, but you also want people who have that. Some people that have a really 30,000-foot view, some people that have really their kind of hands in the soil and a sense of what's going on. So that gets you part of the way there.
Sounds like a great panel. All right, so the last question of the night for those who have been watching this webinar and been excited by your leadership and your vision for the Watson School, how can alumni and parents get involved? How can they be part of this next phase of the Watson School?
Yeah, so I've talked about the importance of bringing in people who are doing exciting things out there in the world, whether that's in politics and in other parts of society. And Brown alums, Brown parents, they are our best resource. Brown community members, in terms of finding people. Sometimes it's you and you're doing things that are interesting. Sometimes it's people in your network who you're close to. You'll have ideas about who we can invite. You'll have ideas of panels we could hold. Maybe people hear the panel that I put together, and they have a different view of who would be great to come talk about AI. And please reach out. We love to have people engaged. We love to have people coming just to be part of our events. Almost all of our events are open to the community. You have to register in advance to make sure we have the right number of seats in the room. And but almost all of our events are open to the community, and I hope that that's something that is a resource to you all. But the more that we can get people engaged, the more great people we're going to have coming from outside of Brown to share their experiences, to share their expertise with students, with faculty, with the community members. And so, I can't emphasize enough how excited I am to have the chance to talk with all of you online this evening, but also to hopefully see you at Watson events in the future and get your emails about suggestions for speakers and other visitors. It's just there's probably literally not a day that goes by where I don't get some great suggestions from the community members. So please send them in.
Great. Well, thank you, Dean. It's been great having this conversation with you. And I too want to thank Rabbi Josh and Abby for all of their work in coordinating this. And I'll turn it back over to the rabbi to close us out.
The rabbi to close us out. John, I thought you would ask on that panel if do they have to be in this world, or could they be, past, because that would make it even more challenging. I was sitting here thinking, you got to get Walt Whitman in conversation with someone, right? I mean, I think we need
Well,
more
no, I
Walt
mean,
Whitman.
right. This is the old, like, if you could have, dinner with any three people from history, who would they be, right? Just kind of expands the set.
Dinner's a little bit more intense because then you have to be on, with them, but just the opportunity to hear from them and learn from them, the stakes are a little bit lower, I think. In any event, John and David, thank you both very much for taking the time this evening to gather with the community and sharing such a bold vision for the future of Watson, and thoughtful vision for, I would say, the future of discourse and engagement, both at Brown and more broadly, civically and otherwise. And I want to thank, of course, Abby Doft and her, incredible role in pulling this together, uh, and the broader Brown Jewish Alumni and Friends Network, along with Brown University Hillel, its network, etc. Thank you, everyone. If this is the last time I get to send greetings before Purim, I wish everyone a happy and joyous Purim holiday. And if this happens to be the last time I get to speak with many of you before Passover, may I be the first one to wish you a kosher and joyous Pesach. Maybe that scares some people for me to even mention Passover, that it's around the corner, but we're getting there. In any event, greetings to everyone, and be well from snowy Providence, and we will talk to you again quite soon. Thank you.